Hello.
All right, we are here with the amazing and best-selling author Erich von Däniken, and you might know him from, again, Ancient Aliens. I'm here with Captain Ron, all the way from Cleveland. I'm Tony Sweet and Hollywood. And Erich, thank you so much. We're so glad that you have this brand new book out, Astronaut Gods of the Maya. And so we're always fascinated when you put this stuff together. It's like, where does he constantly come up with this information? And what inspired this new book?
Well, you know, I have a lot of information because I'm an old man. Finally, I have published so far 40 books, at least in the German languages. So after 40 books, you know a lot. I love the critics because they know nothing. They lose all the time. So I'm happy to discuss with critics, but of course I'm happy to discuss with fans. So you ask me, where do these ideas come from? I study a lot, I read a lot, I travel a lot, and I finally know a lot about my specialty.
And that's why we love you, because there's nobody in this industry, ufology, or anybody that even has a slight interest in UFOs and extraterrestrials that know more than you. I mean, everybody looks up to you. You're the godfather of this. And when I saw this new book come out, I couldn't be more excited, and Captain Ron's the same way, of you sharing some of your personal archives, your personal pictures. And what are some of these pictures that stand out to you that really made the cut to be in this book?
You see, my archive, I have roughly 200,000 pictures.
Oh, wow.
Slides which I took in the last 50 years. In the meantime, half of it, 200,000 pictures, are in the computer, so we can use it anytime. Now, for the Book of the Maya, I start with cargo cult. First, we have to explain what the hell is a cargo cult.
Please.
Whenever the technological lower society comes together with the technological higher society, the lower society does not understand the technology of the higher society. For the lower society, the technology looks something like magic, so they don't understand it. And we can prove this, because the lower society always try to copy some of the higher society, all through they do not know what it is. For example, in the Second World War, the Americans were fighting in the Pacific Ocean against Japan, and they were on an island called Tanna. The Americans just improvised an airport with airstrips. At that time, there were propellant aircraft. There were no jets. Now, after the World War, the Americans disappeared. And what happened? The natives still stood at the airport. They improvised aircrafts made out of wood and straw, not knowing what the motor is, not knowing what the propellant is for. They simply adored it, and they were waiting that these heavenly birds will finally come back. This is cargo cult. And in the Maya history, we can prove a lot of cargo cult, because so many priests and gods have technical belongings around their chest, around their head, in their hands, etc. And that's what I'm showing in the book with some pictures.
And what I find fascinating, and I always say this, that, you know, if you even look at the Greeks and some of their gods, Thor and Zeus, all these gods that they created in their minds, at least believed in it, I feel that you actually have to see something to be that creative. I couldn't imagine, you know, that many thousands of years ago to be able to just make up these gods. So
so precisely, right, Tony? How it looks exactly like a plane.
Exactly. And so, like you're saying in your books, the helmets, the tanks, the rockets, that it's hard for us to believe in this generation, in this day and age, that they just made this up and wrote this, you know, into the scripture or hieroglyphs. And so when you first noticed rockets and, you know, I think the spaceship in Egypt, what really stood out to you and on just saying, oh, they've just had a creative mind?
Well, you know, for me, the phenomenon is worldwide. Now we are talking about the Maya. But for me, as an author who has traveled the world so many times, every year I still have today 100,000 kilometers in flight. So I compare what the Mayas do, I compare it with other societies in the past, and it's always the same story. Worldwide, our Stone Age people, they created, they designed, they chiseled the so-called gods with helmets or halos around their head. Now these cultures had no contact together. I mean, the Aborigines in Australia had no contact with the Maya in Central America, or with the Hopi in Arizona in the United States, or with some tribes in Stone Age Switzerland. But it's all the same worldwide. So what is going on here? Right. That was my first question. And then, of course, you see some technology. And as next, you have to learn the mythology of them. What do they tell in their myths? Do they speak about gods? Do they speak about teachers from heaven? How can you differentiate just the natural religion? Look, a natural religion is, for example, our ancestors were afraid of earthquake. They were afraid of a lightning. Right. They could not understand why the moon is sometimes full on the nightly sky, and then a few days later, it's only half moon. So they were afraid of nature. They adored nature. So natural religions were the first natures. How do you difference between natural religions and the teachers from extraterrestrials? Simply because the extraterrestrials, they gave information, and scientific information. The same thing happens among the Maya. The Maya had the most precise calendar of all these ancient cultures, and they tell that they received the message of the calendar from their teachers from heaven. They know about leap years. They know that Venus surrounds our sun. They knew it so precisely that within 6,000 years, the orbit of Venus would differentiate only with 1 hour. And you ask, where did this come from? From the gods. The gods were our teacher. So that's the difference between natural religion, earthquake and so on, and the teachers from heaven. I remember the book of Enoch. This was the seventh patriarch before the Great Flood, and he has written a book which was found 106 years ago in an ancient library in Ethiopia. In the book of Enoch, Enoch is a human. He learns the language of the ETs. They teach him. One of the ETs say to Enoch, "Human, look out of the window. Do you see this little light out there? You humans call it moon. But the moon has no light by itself. The moon receives its light from the sun." And then they explain him the different phases of the moon. Why is it full? Why is it half? Etc., etc. So these are scientific informations which Stone Age people could not have found out by simple observation. The teachers were from heaven. The same thing happened to the Maya.
While we're on Maya, Mr. Van Däniken, could you speak a little bit to Lord Pakal and what you feel, how that stone drawing is clearly a spaceship of some kind, or what you think that's all about?
Look, in Palenque is a Maya city in Mexico. There are different pyramids, and one of the pyramids is called Temple of Inscription, because they found 810 inscriptions on this pyramid. In 1949, the Mexican archaeologist, Professor Dr. Rutz, discovered a groove on top of the pyramid. Finally, they discovered a staircase inside the pyramid. There was a 3-year-old long excavation period. Finally, they arrived under the pyramid, 7 meters under the pyramid, and there was a tomb. And the tomb was covered with a gigantic stone. I say gigantic. The stone is 3.8 meter long, 2.2 meter large. 1 block, 9 ton. And on the stone, a fantastic chiseling. First, you see something like a frame. At least from the normal eyes, it looks like a frame. Inside the frame, you see a figure bending forward, almost like a motorizing cyclist. He obviously has something like a mask on his nose. He used definitely his hands to manipulate control. He's sitting on a chair. The heel of his left foot is on a kind of pedal. And outside of the frame, you see something like a linking flame. Now, that was my explanation already 50 years ago in Chariots of the Gods. Of course, the Maya archaeologists had complete different interpretation. They said it represents Pakal, which is correct. Pakal was the second last ruler of Palenque, and we know because of the inscription that it is Pakal. And the archaeologists said Pakal is sitting in the open mouth of a mythological monster. He's falling into this mouth, so he's dying. But out of his chest you see the tree of life or the cross of life. What I described as an exhaust at the end, archaeologists described as the stylized beard of the beard of the weather god, and so on and so on. Now time has passed. Since Chariots of the Gods, 50 years have passed. In the meantime, Maya archaeologists have learned much more about the translation of the Maya hieroglyphics. In the meantime, the two American professors, Stewart, it's the father and son from the University of Texas in Austin, they are the best experts in reading Maya writing. They have come up with a book, roughly 3 years ago, where they explain the same stone block, and now in a complete different way. They say, yes, it is Pakal, the second last ruler, but Pakal is not falling into the mouth of a mythological monster. He's not dying. There is no tree of life or cross of life or stylized hairs of the beard of the weather god. All that rubbish is nothing. It all has to do with the cosmos, with the universe. Every detail. Pakal is leaving the earth on a kind of capsule, whatever. So the modern interpretation now underlines what Erich von Däniken has suggested 50 years ago.
I think it's clear as a bell to me. I mean, I don't see it any other way. Have they deciphered what the writing around that is on the perimeter?
Yeah, not everything. A part has been translated, and it clearly says that Pakal is going to heaven, and there are some figures translated, figures which do not correspond then to Pakal. According to archaeology, all this scene was made about 800 AD, so theoretically young. But on this writing, description, there are dates which point to a time which is 1,200 million of years in the past.
Wow.
Simply crazy. Now this 1,200 million means, when you hear it for the first time, nothing. But soon as you have the connection worldwide, then you know that all these rulers in the past, on different ancient cultures, they came together with the same crazy dates of their ages. Maybe remember the Old Testament, the Bible. There were 10 patriarchs before the Great Flood, starting with Adam, then his son Seth, etc., going to Methuselah and Noah. They all had terrible ages. In according to this, the Sumerian king list, the Sumerian, is today in the British Museum in London. There again you find figures of the 10 kings before the Great Flood. Altogether it comes to over 432,000 years. The same thing in old India. So worldwide you find this phenomenon of crazy dates in relation of some ancient rulers before the Great Flood.
Is there something that on these markings or hieroglyphs or anything that you have over the years changed your mind on the actual description or deciphering as a different information? Was there anything that, or is it pretty much kind of set in stone, so to speak?
Pardon the pun.
You know,
right.
I personally was never able to decipher Maya writings. To decipher Maya writings, you have to be a specialist. You have to learn this for at least 3 or 4 years. And only the Maya epigraphers are able to do so. So I was never able to translate these ciphers. All what I did, I saw with my eyes and with my head, which knows about cargo code, that this is a copy of something. Now again, we have to make something clear. Look, we have a Christian culture, and in this Christian culture we have around the world wonderful cathedrals, we have wonderful chapels, we have wonderful Christian music, Christian orchestras, etc. But none of the architects, None of the painters who made, for example, a side altar in a cathedral was an eyewitness in the time of Jesus.
Right.
No one was there 2,000 years ago when Jesus worked around. They all have done their artistic work because of tradition. The same thing in Central America. The chiseler who made this stone chiseling on the tombstone of Palenque probably was never an eyewitness. He never saw an extraterrestrial who descended. But from tradition, he knew that they were here, that around the Earth were gigantic cities. From these gigantic cities, smaller vehicles have come down. Today we would call them space shuttles. Out of these smaller vehicles, again smaller vehicles would come out. For example, like the moon car, the car on the moon. Right. So, and some thousands of years ago, some pre-Maya saw this. It went into tradition, and later some chiseler, some Stone Age artist chiseled in stone, but he was not an eyewitness.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of when you think this took place on Earth? Do you have, after looking at all these different time signatures and places, when do you think this occurred?
At least 3 times in the past. The third time must have been somewhere 6,000 BC, and the second time around 3,000 BC, and the third time in biblical time, more or less the time of the prophet Ezekiel, and which corresponded to the time of the Maya or the pre-Maya tribes.
So they should be due to be coming back, right? Because they all say they're coming back. Each and every one of these legends says they're coming back, right?
You see, this is a promise which the so-called gods have left. Some thousands of years. Extraterrestrials arrived on this planet. They behaved themselves like today's ethnologists would do. Now, our Stone Age people could not understand what was going on, and they believed that these extraterrestrials are the gods. We all know that there are no gods. There's only one God. Now, these extraterrestrials, they behave themselves like ethnologists would do today. They learned a few languages, they studied a few tribes, they gave us some information like in astronomy and in culture and so, and finally they disappeared with the promise to return in a far future. And this promise of return was part of every antique culture. Maybe you remember when Francisco Pizarro was the conqueror, the Spanish conqueror, who came us first to today's Peru. When he came to Peru, the natives, the Incas, believed that Francisco Pizarro is the long-awaited god. They all fell down on their knees, adored him. The same thing in Central America. There, the Spanish conqueror's name was Hernando Cortés. He came together with Moctezuma. Moctezuma was the ruler of the Aztecs. Even the ruler, the king, fell down on his knees. He believed that Hernando Cortés is the long-awaited god. Or in the South Sea, far away, for example, James Cook. James Cook, the British explorer, he came to Hawaii. The native of Hawaii fell down on their knees. They adored him. They believed that was the long-awaited God. This repeats worldwide. So the idea of the expectation of someone is not a Christian invention. It existed long before Christianity. And what do we have today? I'm educated as a Catholic. We believe that Jesus Christ will return one day. But the Muslim society believes that their Mahdi will return one day. We all know the Buddhist society is waiting for the return of Buddha. The great Jewish community is waiting for the returning of their Messiah. So even today, in every religion, you have this expectation of the return of somebody. Now, to be honest, not every religion can be correct. Some of them must be wrong.
Right.
I'm afraid they are all wrong. Neither Jesus, nor Buddha, nor Messiah, nor Mahdi will return. Simply extraterrestrials. And maybe they are here and observe us already.
Well, maybe there's something similar going on, because when we go to contact in the desert and you show up, everybody drops to their knees and bows down like you're the gods coming. So
come on. Oh,
maybe
come on.
that's
funny.
something similar. I wanted to ask you this, Mr. Van Däniken. We have a lot of people, Tony and I are we preach this. So a lot of times people challenge us. What do you feel are the strongest pieces of evidence that we can point to substantiate the ancient alien theory, like concrete evidence?
Well, concrete evidence, definitely the tombstone of Palenque, which we just were talking about it, but also the desert of Nazca in Peru, you know, with these gigantic lines in the ground. And here I nerve myself every year. You see some so-called scientific TV documentaries, and they don't show you the truth. They just show you some figures in the ground, which was scratched off from the ground. That's not the mystery. The mysteries are the gigantic lines, the cut-off mountains, etc. So these are things which you can see, you can prove something is definitely wrong here. And then concerning the old literature, of course, quote the prophet Ezekiel in the Bible, or quote the prophet Enoch, but then you have the book of Enoch. Compare it with the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is an Indian literature, and there in the 5th book, so-called Mausala Purva, you find a similar story, and as you would find in Enoch. Some of the men, his name was Jonah, was taken up in one of these cities around the earth. He describes what happened, he comes back, etc. So you have very, very strong arguments.
Yeah, I think so. I think Jonah, even that story of the fish, where they think it was probably a submarine, right?
Well, definitely. I mean, in the Bible, it is written that Jonah was in a fish for 3 days. But in reality, in the old Jewish old fairy tales, this is old Jewish literature, they say that Jonah entered into a fish like he goes into a door. And the fish went under the water, and Jonas could look on little windows out what was in the water. The water was enlightened, so there were lamps and lights out there, and he could speak with the fish. And after 3 days, the fish slowly brought him back to the land again. Now Jonah is one example which the ordinary public one. You compare it with Oannes. Oannes is a Sumerian legend with the same story. Or you compare it with the Greek story of the Argonauts. You know, the Argonauts, they had a ship called Argo, and the Argonauts were the people who owned the ship. And one of a sudden, on a sea, we don't know which sea it was, of a sudden, a submarine comes out of the water with blowing and making noise, etc. The submarine comes to the water and gives a message to the Argonauts from God Apollo. And then the submarine disappears again in the ground. So all these stories have worldwide references.
Right. Do you think that there's this is continuing? A lot of these have happened. You discovered these 50, 60 years ago. Is there recent stuff that we found that is compelling, that adds to the evidence that's been in the last, I don't know, 10 years even?
Well, you see, the recent stuff we found are in our solar system. Look, between Mars and Jupiter, there is the so-called asteroid belt. Asteroid belt is composed of hundreds of thousands of stone, broken stones. Some of them are small, like a football. Others are very, very big. The asteroid with the name Ceres is the biggest one. He has a diameter of 930 kilometers. Now, American space probes, one of them has the name Dawn, was for 8.5 years on the way, has now arrived in the asteroid belt and sent back to Earth wonderful pictures of the surface of Ceres. And there you see definitely, there's no doubt, you see a rectangular made out of stone. And in the rectangular you see a square. Now there is no natural explanation for that. Now it is a fact that we humans, we were never there on Ceres. So if we were not there, who was it? Somebody else. Now a spaceship who is on the way for hundreds and hundreds of years, the so-called generation spaceship, when it arrives into a new solar system, it has to use something to refuel. Whatever is some raw material, some uranium, whatever. And to refuel the spaceship, you do not steal the raw material from the planet which is inhabited. You simply look in the solar system, where do we find raw material? And in the asteroid belt, you find raw material completely free. absolutely easy. It makes sense that somebody on the asteroid Ceres just took some raw material.
Erich,
The same thing, by the way, on Mars. We have wonderful pictures from the surface of Mars, and there we see circles. We see all kinds of strange things which have nothing to do with the surface of Mars. And of course, we look for the next reasonable scientific explanation, but we don't find any more scientific explanation. So you ask for new indications. The new indications will come to us anyhow. And the critics have no chance. Sooner or later,
Right.
It's clear to everyone. We were visited by beings from outer space.
Well, I'm going to ask you this because I always find it fascinating, and we've had many people on the show talking about the pyramids of Egypt, but I find it fascinating that there are pyramids all over the world, and at that time, it's not like you have internet or phone calls or faxes that you can send the plans to build pyramids exactly the same all over the world. Not that what were the pyramids built for, but why the structure of a pyramid? Why do you think that they built the same all over the world? What would?
Well, we only can speculate. Pyramid is like a tower, and the pyramids in Central America are completely different to the pyramids in Egypt. Mm-hmm. The pyramids in Egypt, they are roughly a triangle, but the pyramids in Central America, they look like towers, looking over the jungle, over the trees, so they have to climb up there to make their observation in the sky. The pyramid in Egypt, they say, were made for the pharaohs as burial place. But in the big pyramid of Cheops, we never found a mummy. We found a tomb, yes, but not the mummy, etc. So it's very, very complicated. And what confuses me, in the last 20 years, our brilliant Egyptologists, they make always new discoveries in the Great Pyramid. They find new shafts, new rooms, etc. But the public is not informed.
Wow.
No one goes to the press and tells the public what's going on there. I know the information. That's why I show it in my pictures, in my lectures. But I don't understand why they don't go to public with all these things. In the meantime, we know in the Great Pyramid there are more than 1 kilometer of shafts. 1 kilometer means planning. You have to plan this before you start the construction of the pyramid. Planning means engineering, means calculating, means designing. But Cheops, the one who should have made the pyramid, his father's name is Snorkel, they simply came from Stone Age. There was no evolution in technology for the whole planning, engineering, and these things. So they must have received some information from someone. Again, in the Great Pyramid, there are old Arabian historians who say the pyramid was made before the Great Flood. By whom? By a king. His name was Saurit. And then they say Saurit is the same figure which the Hebrew community calls Enoch. Enoch, again, is the same figure which was educated by extraterrestrials in his spaceship. Enoch is the one who learned the language of the extraterrestrials. Enoch is the first human who left our planet in a fiery chariot. Even in the Bible, before the Great Flood. Only later came the prophet Elijah, much later. Enoch was the first one who disappeared. Now, old Egyptian writings say Enoch was the constructor of the pyramid. Enoch was taught by the extraterrestrials in engineering. He would have known to make the plans, the calculation, etc. Of course, the dirty work we did, our ancestors.
So you do feel that we built the pyramids, the humans built the pyramids, but we were...
Definitely, yes.
Right. The designs were given to us by extraterrestrials.
Yeah, you always have to ask why.
Right.
Our ancestors worldwide, they made fantastic temples. It was our ancestor who made it, not extraterrestrials. The question is why? For what reason have our ancestors done this? Now, the natural explanation is they did it for the gods. Wonderful. For which gods?
Right.
That's gods in nature. As I explained before, that's not enough because the gods have given scientific information to our ancestors.
Right. Here's a why question for you. Why do you think there's so much resistance to this evidence? I mean, it's very compelling to me.
Because we are humans. You see, generally spoken, on this planet, you can differentiate between two sorts of human. One sort is religious. It doesn't matter what kind of religion. The other sort is scientific. Now, the religious people have been educated that God made everything, the universe, the stars, the planets, the water, the trees, but as the crown of creation, the God made us humans. The scientific community is observed it's all evolution, mutation, and selection. But we are on the top of evolution. So in both cases, if we look at it religiously, we are the crown of creation. If we look at it scientifically, we are the top of evolution. In both cases, we look at ourselves as the greatest. There is nothing greater in the universe than we. That's why we have a psychological problem. We don't want the extraterrestrials. We are afraid we are not the greatest anymore.
This is true. Yeah, this is true. And I'm looking at some of the pictures through your book, and the detail that I find, it reminds me of Michelangelo, and it reminds me of the masters of artistry. And is there one of your favorites that you tend to always go back to when you looking at your pictures? Because I do it when I go on different trips and stuff, and there's always something that just stands out to me. Is there one that it's one of your favorites that you love to just go to?
Well, definitely the tombstone of Palenque, we were talking before, and in Nazca, south of Lima in Peru, where we have these lines. There is one picture which is called the Mandala. The Mandala is a geometrical message. It's absolutely sensational. We have not found out what the message is, but it is definitely a gigantic geometrical figure in the ground in the desert of Nazca. And I presented this to several scientists. They said, fascinating. But what is it? What geometrical message? We have no idea.
It's the first crop circle, Tony.
And I'm showing, because I'm trying to show pictures while we're talking so people can understand, and I'm showing a picture of it. It is fascinating to think that they could create this and so precise and all on the ground. It's not like we have aerial, views for them to do this. So how do you feel that they did create this? Because I'm looking at it now. It can't just be like sticking a stick in the ground and having a line, a rope, and then just make circles. I mean, you have to. This is called intelligence to build this, because I know I couldn't do it.
You see, in Nazca, you have to differentiate three different things. The one thing are the figures. The figures are fishes, monkeys, spiders, hummingbirds, etc.
Right.
And these figures were definitely made by us, by the humans. You simply have to crush away the surface. The surface is of brown little stones. When you crush it away, a bright shining surface appears. With this way, you could have crashed out the figures. These figures are not very big. The biggest of it, the hummingbird, has a diameter of 29 meters, which is nothing. The next thing is the lines. And with lines, I mean the small lines. They have approximately 1 meter wide, but the longest is 23 kilometers long. Straight ahead over hills, mountains. We don't know why they did it, but theoretically you could do this also with crash away the surface. But then comes the third problem. This is the so-called Las Pistas. They look like airstrips. I do not say they were airstrips, but they look like airstrips. They start abruptly, they end abruptly. The longest of it is 3.8 kilometers long. Now, what they never show in these scientific documentaries on television, some of these Las Pistas are set up on broke-off mountains. So they had to cut up completely the top of some mountains. And here we have absolutely no explanation how they did it. And finally, what for? Why do they have to cut off mountains, make gigantic lines, 3.8 kilometers long? In archaeology, they always come with cultures. It was a culture for astronomy. The lines of Nazca have nothing to do with astronomy. It was a cult for the calendar. The line of Nazca had nothing to do with the calendar. It was a cult. They're always cults. They never want to see the reality. It is simply something which has to do with the gods, and the gods were extraterrestrials.
And the fact that
I even
this is
suggest in
so many
Nazca,
cultures.
some of these gods probably took something of some kind of raw material, whatever it is, because nobody was living in Nazca. They steal nothing from us Earthlings.
Do you think? Do you agree with Sitchin that that's why they came here to get material, raw materials like gold or whatever?
On the planet Earth, yes, this is possible. By the way, Sitchin, we have been very good friends together, and I agree with many of his suggestions, with his translations from Sumerian hieroglyphs. But I was never in the same opinion concerning the 12th planet. I said, no, there was something in our solar system, a gigantic spaceship, but not the planet. But that's another thing.
I never understood that, though. If they came here just for material, because we've heard about the Anunnaki, and why would they even care to give us technology if they're just here? I mean, I'm just thinking as a human, because humans just go in and take, and they don't care what the cost is to the surroundings. So I'm thinking that why would they even want to give us any technology or any theories to leave us with and say we're coming back? And it sounds like that they meant peacefully. So if they were here just to take, why didn't they just take and not even care to leave us any technology?
Maybe they had a feeling for us. Maybe they knew of evolution. Look, the whole ancient Greece is all the ruins in ancient Greece.
Right.
They lie under a geometrical pattern. All these ancient Greek holy sites are linked together in the same way, in the same geometrical structures. Now, we can ask why. The same question as you can ask, what's the purpose of it?
Right.
Now, I suggest some thousands of years ago, the humans, they worshipped the god. And they tell the gods, listen, we want to do something so that our followers, our next generation, will never forget you. And the so-called gods say, okay, make your temple in our honor on that place, and the next temple only on this place, and the overnext on that place. And they knew, the extraterrestrials, that it was a geometrical pattern. Our Stone Age people had no idea that it was a geometrical pattern. The extraterrestrials knew that the technical evolution would take place for the coming thousands of years. And in the future, the human society would be able to fly. They will fly over their lands. They will measure their lands. They will make cards, maps of it. And of a sudden they realize something is wrong here. From Stone Age, all these old size cities are in the same geometrical pattern. And just because of it, the humans start to ask questions. How is this explainable? Then we look for the next scientific answer, for something reasonable. And when we have no reasonable answer anymore, automatically we come to the question, have maybe extraterrestrials been there? And that's the situation we have today, because of the geometrical pattern. Without it, we would not ask the question. As soon as we have the question, have we been visited from outer space? The next question is, do they come back? Do we have to be afraid of it? Do we have to be prepared for it? Now, in the past, we were not afraid of them. They were teachers. Now, they return, and they did good things to the humans in the past. Simply that in the future, we are not afraid of them. We will remember when they show up again. Hey, some thousands of years ago, they were our teachers. They helped us. They are not here to destroy us, to kill us. So that's maybe the message why they helped us in the past.
That's a good one.
Do you think that they were also our creators? Like, do you think that they intervened with our DNA? Do you think that's the missing link? Do you think there was some DNA manipulation going on?
Definitely. You know, in a few months, my newest book will come out in the United States. It will be the continuation of Chariots of the Gods. It has the title, The Gods Never Left Us. And there I make absolutely clear that we are the product of evolution. Definitely yes, but not only. Not only. There were always interferences. Through the human history, there were always changing of our genetical code. And you know, all the critics say, This is nonsense. My God, we on our planet, we have trees. For example, we have a cherry tree, we have an apple tree. And in the past, we have changed the cherry and the apple tree by grafting. So we have interfered in the genome of the tree to make it better. We did that. That's a fact. And the extraterrestrials, they did it also with us. They always come and change something in our genetical code. We are the product of evolution, yes, but not only. And that's what will come out in the genetic research in the next few years, I think.
Well, you know, I can't believe you're writing more books. I mean, you don't stop. I don't know how you have time to do anything. You travel all over the world. You must write on the plane while you're traveling from location to location. Is that what you do?
No. I'm happy to be at home. I am like in the big library, but the library is my own. And I'm reading a lot, and I'm always learning. I want to know what is new in archaeology. Are there new translations from old books? What is new in genetics? So I'm a man who can never make holidays. Holidays is something terrible. How can people lie down on a sand beach and do nothing? I don't understand this. Information is for me the biggest thing in my life.
Wow.
Well, if you guys are just tuning in, you need to first pick up this latest book before his new book comes out, because this just came out itself. Astronaut Gods of the Maya, Extraterrestrial Technologies, the Temples and Sculptures. And I know before we end, please go to Erich von Däniken's website, Däniken.com. And I know, Ron, you had something else you wanted to.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, you know, Tony and I, since we've been doing this show, we go to Contact in the Desert, we go to the Stargate in Laughlin, we go to the different conferences. And I have to say that when we see all of these guys that we look up to, from Giorgio Tsoukalos to Baval to all of them, they all mention, the only reason I do this is because of Erich von Däniken.
Yep.
The guys we look up to all point to you. And we're really honored to have you here on Truth Be Told. And we really appreciate you sharing this with our audience. It really meant a lot to us. And I hope you continue to write, because everything drives this cause forward, and we really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the compliment. Don't forget, I'm the oldest of all these writers.
Yes, you are.
Giorgio Tsoukalos is a very good friend of mine. Yeah. He grew up in Switzerland. And I teach him a lot, and he's a brilliant personality. And many of the other authors, we know each other. We support each other. There is no jealousy. So I'm the oldest one, and I started all this when I was a 17-year-old boy. Wow. In the meantime, I'm 82. 80, yeah.
Yeah, you're the same age as my father, and I have to say, you just talking to you, you're so sharp and so still passionate, because so many people
right on.
They're not they know the knowledge, but they don't have the passion, and I think that's what really shines through with you. And so, thank you so much, Erich. Thank you so much for being a part of us, and then everything that we do, and inspiring us every day. So thank you, and please continue.
Okay, thank you for being a guest on your show.
You got
Thank you for the interview. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
We appreciate it.
We really appreciate it.
Well, I guess that's it, folks. That's it for Truth Be Told today. But, man, what a great honor that was, huh, Tony?
Oh, my gosh. You can't ask for anybody better.
No, really he's the king of this. And it's true. Not only did they say that during the speeches, but a lot of these guys, we were hanging out when we had beers at Nori's party, and they would mention that. They would just, it would just come out. Well, I read Chariots of the Gods. That's what started all of these things.
Yeah.
And I think it's growing with the ancient aliens phenomenon, and
and I think that's what
Truth Be Told.
when Ancient Aliens came out, that's why I think it became such a huge show, is because people like him have been putting so much work together. Because if you were just throwing out some crap, and people would smell that. I mean, they would smell it, and they would that show wouldn't have lasted a season. And I think because of him and his knowledge has passed it on to all these others, I think that's why people are really like, wow, this is really what I needed, and this is what
I agree. And it's a new generation that gets to hear what Chariots of the Gods said 50 years ago. Yeah. Like, if you watch Chariots of the Gods, as wonderful as it is, it feels so dated, like from the music and the video. Right. It's just terrible. But the content is so strong. And I think that resonates. And now we have a new audience getting to hear that stuff. And it all goes back to Chariots of the Gods. That's what kicked it off. And Erich von Däniken was behind that. And it's just been great having him on.
Yeah, it was fun.
But I guess that's we're out of time, aren't we?
We're out of time, but you guys don't have to stop watching Truth Be Told, because if you're listening to us on our podcast, we have over 500 Truth Be Told shows on our YouTube channel, Truth Be Told TV. Please, if you're watching it, right below, subscribe, and please share this with somebody. I know we love to watch other people's channels, and we love to share as much as we can information that we think that you should hear or see. So, again, thank you from Tony Sweet and Captain Ron right here on Truth Be Told. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.